I am in need of some witty responses to people I've just met. The problem is that I have a highly unusual name, so much so that I've had to pull out ID to prove it's actually my name. And when I meet new people, I usually get a comment or compliment about how they like my name. It's always been awkward for me, so recently I've started responding with thanks. I got it for my birthday. It gets a good response.
Oh, I like that.
I know this line will get old after a while, so please, brothers, I need some comic genius to come up with new responses. Fancy. Yes, it's my real name.
Can
you beat them to the punch? Like when you say, like, my name's Fancy, so this is your one chance. Don't let me down.
Yeah. I mean, that is,
You
I
just
think,
go
probably
with
the
that?
joke all three of us were planning on.
I
planning
decided
on
to
dropping.
execute it faster.
I mean,
and
yeah,
more-
you're
and
the
worse.
oldest. You're the-
And without any sort of real punchline. It's more
Isn't
a
that
sketch.
song about a prostitute, though?
It could be applied to all manner of professions. I always thought it was more like a sort of a geisha host situation, but
Yeah.
Fancy was offering the girlfriend experience. So there's no sex exchange that's never writ large, that
No.
there's sexual favors exchange. She says just be nice to the gentleman, Fancy, and they'll be nice to you. I assume she means to offer the girlfriend experience in some sort of Japanese host bar.
It also says don't give up the butt, Fancy, though. In the second,
Don't
Not
give up.
it said not till the fifth date.
in the second
Don't
bridge, it
give-
says, "Here's your one chance, Fancy. Don't give up that butt." And then that's in the live edit, not in the studio version. In the earlier EP, in Reba's first EP, there was a lot of anal.
Don't give up the butt for less than $3 big.
3 big?
When you,
$3 big, that's $300.
That's not very
three-
big. I can think of way
three
bigger
large.
things than that.
What? No, 3 large is 3,000. 3 big is 300.
what's 3 huge?
3 million. 3 is 3.
It's $3.
Just 3.
$3.
That is not a fancy price for a butt.
When you tell people your name is Fancy and they doubt it, can you say something like, "Oh, it's short for Fancerson"?
Can you correct yourself and be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Nancy," and then just move on?
Walk away.
Did I say
It's
fancy?
short for Nancy.
My name is Fnancy. It's an F apostrophe N, like a Lovecraft name or something.
Can you clarify afterwards? You know, like the ketchup. Fancy style. You ever see that? You ever know some fancy style ketchup?
Sure.
Fancy ketchup.
Yeah, you don't ever want plain style ketchup. It's just
No, I
red
want-
water.
Fancy. It's a fun name to say.
Ooh, Griffin, you just made me think of something. Maybe just say your name so much that it loses all meaning.
Oh my God! And they can't
You don't know
no longer
those are-
address you.
And you sit there and go, hey, it's fancy, 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 fancy.
You could become
And
the
then they
president.
walk away and you lose
Yeah.
friends.
You could become the president of our United States of America, and then that name would be sort of the same concept. Like the name would be so normalized at that point because it's like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like you guys,
Like there had to be an uptick of like Baracks.
yeah,
after
or like
Barack Obama.
at the very least, like when somebody names their kid Barack, it's not like the Mortal Kombat fighter. Like no, that's Baraka. Stop it.
Get your shit together.
Here's your one chance, Fancy. Don't let me down.
Okay, I don't know what to tell Fancy. That's a
I
tough.
really
but
like saying it.
I know I do too.
Fancy, fancy, fancy,
Fancy, here's- we
fancy,
can't-
fancy, fancy,
fancy, fancy,
fancy, fancy, fancy,
fancy, fancy.
We can't
fancy.
get- okay.
Which episode of My Brother Me should I start with? Try 196. They say fancy over and over again for 3 minutes.
What if, okay, here's what you do. Tell them your name's Fancy, and when they're like, Fancy, say, well, that's my middle name, and I go by that. And then they say, well, what's your first name? And I want you to say, Exquisite.
I'm Exquisite Fancy Delight. That's my name. Sounds like a cat food brand, but it's not.
It's a name for me.
It's a name for me. I got it for my birthday. And then they'll be too busy laughing.